Ian, thank you so much, and to the Scottish Society of Northern Studies for this amazing, fabulous opportunity to be in conversation with two crime writers who surely can be seen, both of them, as emblematic of Scottish crime fiction and Scandinavian crime fiction. If I might just spend a couple of moments, I'm sure you are familiar, everyone here, with these two authors, but just in case, if not, Lynn Anderson, welcome. It is lovely to have this opportunity to talk with you. I hope you're well. How are you this afternoon?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, looking forward to this.
Yeah. So Scottish novelist and screenwriter, and best known, of course, for her best-selling series featuring forensic scientist Dr. Rona McLeod, and also for the fact that Lynn is the co-founder, as was mentioning in the earlier session, of probably one of the best crime fiction writing festivals in the world, Bloody Scotland. And just thinking over the 10 years how it's grown. And I will come back, if I may, Lynn, and ask you about the Scandinavian authors and that connection there, and bringing them over, throughout the course of time. So welcome. And yeah, let's see where we go with your writing as well. Alongside Lynn, an author whose work I have admired for so long, and I think as well that idea of work that has been adapted for TV, and I always love the way that those TV adaptations then bring people into reading as well. There's that circular notion. Multi-award winning author Arne Dahl, creator of the best-selling Into Crime or Argeruppen series, made into a critically acclaimed BBC TV series. Arne's books have sold over 4 million copies and have been translated into more than 30 languages. More recently, we've become acquainted with the Samberia series. And I think again, I'm wanting to ask about the idea of, I know for both of you, you have more than one series, and just those moving into different persona that you create for us on the pages. So welcome, Arne. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm fine. I'm actually in Greece right now, so I have the necessary distance to my northern country.
Very good. And I do hope that those, although you said it was raining before we started in the session, but I do hope those supposedly warmer climes do not prevent you from grappling with the cold and the darkness that is, I think, Nordic and Scottish. I'm loath to use the terminology tartan noir, and also those labels that sometimes restrict, but then also give us a sense of place. So forgive me if over our session terminology is used that people maybe disagree with. Anyway, just a little bit of brief background. I did a bit of reading beforehand, and I'm in no way an expert, but I noted a couple of points about the connection between these two spaces, shall we say, that there is a construct known as Scandinavian Scotland that came to being between the 8th and the 15th century, at a time when Viking and Norse settlers colonised parts of modern Scotland in the north, so Orkney, Shetland, the Hebrides, and the islands of Clyde. I love that sense of being surrounded by the Norsemen. Yeah, beautiful. And of course, even nowadays, in present time, we can appreciate that impression that the Norse and Viking colonizations and settlements made, if we think of place names, language, genetics, cultural heritage. And then I think somebody who you are all, within the society probably very familiar with, but that special relationship, and I thought this was lovely for our time together in this session, special relationship between Scotland and Sweden that developed between 1569 and 1654. And it was explored by Alexia Grosjean's publication from 2003 entitled An Unofficial Alliance. That existed between Sweden and Scotland, which makes my heart sing because they're two countries that are very important to me. And last but by no means least, almost that enduring affinity that many of you may know and have experienced between Shetland and Norway. So when Norway and Scotland play football, for Shetlanders, an alliance may exist elsewhere than with the mainland, shall we say. I love that link that's there. I'll begin with this, though, to ask my authors. An article 2018, Charlotte Lindell looked at similarities between Scottish and Scandinavian crime fiction. And she observed, and I'll quote, "There is a glow about Scottish and Scandinavian crime writing. Tartan noir and Nordic noir both exude an air of confidence, pride, and independence." So I'll bring it to your writing first, and we can then go out further, because it's always easy to talk about our own things, maybe. Lynn, as a Scottish crime writer, would you say that your writing exudes that air of confidence, pride, and independence?
I don't know. Asking a writer what they think their writing exudes is okay. I don't. You have to ask my readers about that. But what I could say is, thinking about the Scandi link, I should point out I used to live in Orkney. Now, we always mention Shetland and Norway, but in fact, Orkney's is close to Scandinavia. When I took up my post there as a young teacher in Kirkwall Grammar School, and I was asked to read out, you're given a registration class that you have to check their attendance, and I struggled with quite a few of the names, I have to say, much to the amusement of my class, because it was a lot of Rognavalds and Erlands and Erlings, and something when I taught in Glasgow I hadn't really experienced. And it was fascinating because, like Shetland, Orkney has a very, very strong link with the Nordic countries. And the first time I went to Norway, which was for a book, Follow the Dead, and we got off the airplane and we thought, well, how do we get out of here? And then we noticed above a doorway it said "Ut." So we knew how to get out. And there was that feeling of, it's okay, I've not come to anywhere really foreign, it's just across. And I remember when I was asking the police in that I went to visit about the book, I said, well, is the weather different? And in Stavanger, and they said, no, whatever you get on the plane in Aberdeen, it's the same weather when you get off at the other side. So I think those connections were really brought home to me very, very powerfully. On a sort of funnier note, you were talking about the Vikings down the west coast of Scotland, and I was born in Greenock, and I used to go swimming in Gourock. My father was a police detective. He was very tall, and he had 3 daughters, all of whom were just not far short of 6 foot. And then I suddenly realised that probably the reason for that is, despite the fact of people in Greenock normally being quite short, I thought that's my Viking heritage, of course, the Battle of Largs and all that. So, but I found one other wee funny thing. I had to go in for an operation once, and, before they knock you out and they talk to you to make you feel calm. And I was telling them I had a funny thing in my tendons in my left hand, but I believe that is a Viking. It's a Viking trait. It's in the genes. And they said, yes, that's true. But I should point out that Maggie Thatcher had that too. So thereupon I never claimed it again.
Yeah, it's like that link. Maybe not. Stick with the Vikings. Definitely, definitely. Have you ever done your DNA?
Yes, I have. I think my kids gave me it. Well, I know my mother was Irish, so I have a strong Irish connection. And there was some Scandinavian in it as well, enough for me to sort of claim to be you know, a compatriot of Arne's here. That was interesting, but yeah, not anything I didn't know.
No, already. Yeah. So those things that, again, you talked about linguistic experiences, Lynn, and geographical experiences, you know, the climate. Arne, I wonder for yourself, your experiences of Scotland, and because I know you visited a number of book festivals. I don't know if you've done any own exploration, and if, as somebody coming from Sweden, if arriving in Scotland, did you feel an affinity? I know, for example, the Icelandic crime writers that I know, when they arrive in Scotland, they feel like they've not left home. So what's it been like for yourself?
Yeah, well, there's so many things to say, really, but the first thing that comes to mind is the hospitality, and the feeling that I'm not an alien, and I'm not in any way beneath you, which you sometimes can feel in England, if I may say so. A little bit, perhaps, not much, but and a down-to-earth mentality that perhaps is similar to ours, and probably could also be seen in crime fiction. You know, not the same hierarchical structures, perhaps, but a little bit more evened out. And then just the feeling that every time I've been to for example, Edinburgh or Stirling, also, you have really felt that you are welcome. It's not a show. And then I took the opportunity to in connection with this to visit the islands, at least a couple of them, and went away, and not only looking for distilleries, but to a certain extent that too. So, but when you came to the Highlands and you felt this is very much like home in a way, and the islands too, it's so, we have the Stockholm archipelago very close to me. I have my summer house there, for example, and I felt, because it's not exactly the same, which is also a point. It would be a little bit boring if it was exactly the same, but a feeling of connectedness, that you actually felt that this is associates with us somehow, some way. And that thing about the weather was also interesting, because we have the same in, was it Aberdeen or was it?
Yes, it was Aberdeen. I flew from.
Yeah, exactly. And we have like this. We look at Oslo and see what the weather is, and then in Stockholm we get the same weather 1 hour later. It's always like that.
Yeah. So the whole notion. Let's stay with this point about the climate and the atmosphere. And of course, it's said that because the weather is not bright and shiny, it does inform crime writing. And I asked some authors at Iceland Noir recently, because I can't understand how people can write sunshine noir. I don't see crime, and I know it is, but I don't see it being committed in sunny climate. I need the darkness. I need that weather that's almost, you know, that other character that against which many an investigator also has to struggle. So Lynn, I wonder, in your series with Rona, were you aware of writing weather that suited the grimness of the cases?
Yes, and I think the weather is really important. Well, it is in Scotland, because but also we're talking about the light, and I think we share that business of really celebrating when summer comes, and we have those incredible long days. I mean, I remember when I lived in Orkney in particular, you know, waking up at 3 in the morning and thinking I'd missed the alarm and I should be going to work at school. And of course, it's it's the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And I have that in the Highlands as well, but not quite to the extent that obviously Orkney and Shetland. And that pacing your world, you can't enjoy the dark, but yet you can use it, you can be part of it, you can accept it. And as soon as we get to a wee bit nearer Christmas, of course, we'll know we're coming out of it again. And I lived for 5 years in northern Nigeria, and I think the biggest issue for me was the fact that the days never changed. You know, the weather changed slightly. You had a wet season, a very dry season, but the sun went down almost exactly at the same time every night. You know, there was no real differentiation in that. And I think it's a powerful force in writing as well. And the way that I have, I mean, not through choice initially, I think it was just luck, that each of the books sort of moves into the next season. So, you know, I'm working on one that is at this time of year, and the next one will be spring, and that's the way it's happened. And it's wonderful because, like the landscape, the light is, and the lack of light is incredibly important, and the weather. So they're all characters that are either playing against you or playing on your side if you're lucky.
Yeah, and you've made me think of, and I know Ian's mentioned it in the chat, and we should say so. I mean, it was one of my highlights of reading more recently, and Anna and I got to chat about this. But in the You Are Next, so Mittelvatten, I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah, and thank you, Ian, again for your work on this. The whole aspect of water and inhabiting the darkness in the water. Could you speak to us a little bit about that, Arne?
Well, I think it's probably the same. The water is very cold, even in the summertime. So you never really feel, oh, how lovely it will be to go swimming, but we will feel, okay, let's do it. And then there is the darkness. There are also the small lakes that are really dark and have this loss of iron and metals in it. So it becomes very difficult to look through. And I thought that was, for this book, you mentioned You Are Next. I really wanted to use that darkness beneath the surface. And I guess in a way, that's what we do. Use the darkness beneath the surface in general. It's easy to become Montesquieu or something, you know, the climate. Okay, we write dark because we have darkness around us, and then we write light in the summertime. It's not really like that, but there is something about the changes, like Lynn said. I think that's really important. One of my latest books also ended with the words, "And then the autumn came," or something like that. You had the light, and you had the small breaths of autumn coming through here and there, but then, and you think it's time now, maybe for the autumn. No, it's not quite yet, and then you feel a little later, okay, maybe now. But then the last words of the book is, and then the autumn came. And so, yes, very important. And you can pick and choose the light you want for the book. You need the light to go darker, or you need the darkness to go lighter. And it's very good when you have these 4 seasons to play with.
Yeah, I take your point, that need for contrast, because without one, how can we appreciate the other? And so, Lynn, I wonder, in your latest book, The Wild Coast, do you play with light and dark there? Because I'm also thinking of the light and dark as well of the human condition. So however you wish to come back to us on the notion of the way you use that contrast in your writing, and if we could maybe talk about your most recent work.
Yes, well, the Wild Coast is set up the west coast of Scotland for the most part between Achmelvich and Arisaig. A beautiful coastline. On a wonderful sunny day, you could be in Greece. You could be, anywhere because the water is so blue, the sand is so white, and it might even be a bit warm, But of course, that it's not like being in the Med where you have that and pretty well guaranteed for, 2 months. If you get it, you are in heaven. Mm-hmm. But you might wake up tomorrow and it's gone. Mm-hmm. And it's that wonderful feeling where I must just use it while I have it. Now, I'm quite a keen swimmer, even though obviously the water never gets really warm. My French daughter-in-law cannot believe, she doesn't go in swimming unless it's about 25 degrees, the water, the Med or something. Not me. And so I love that sort of area. And I was out camping there myself, and we had a spell of wonderful weather. And the people who were camping on the same site near Arisaig, it felt like the Mediterranean, and it all feels so beautiful, as if it's going to last forever. And it also feels incredibly safe. Mm. And I was there camping. I wasn't on my own, I was with my husband, but there was quite a lot of single campers, quite a lot of women camping and getting up and then driving on, I think doing the NC 500. And when you're in the north of Scotland, the northwest of Scotland, there is a definite feeling of being safe. And if you have a spell of wonderful weather, it's not pouring with rain, it's not dark clouds, and you feel like you're in heaven. And so that was what gave me the idea to write The Wild Coast, because of course after you read it you'll never feel that way again. When you go up the west coast of Scotland, or of course you'll remember that it's just fiction. Yeah. And I think it's I don't think I would have written that book if it had not come from that moment, June, end of June, which is traditionally the best month actually in Scotland. July tends to be wetter. And all those things came together. So I would say the weather plays a huge part in what I write, and often gives me an idea. Just a contrast to that, the book that went to Norway, Follow the Dead, came about because I spoke to the mountain rescue team in Aviemore. And you'll be interested in this, Arne. He showed me a photograph of a light plane which was completely festooned in the most amazing icicles. It was frozen solid. And he said that came from the north of Norway, north of Sweden. And we get lots of planes from there, and they're used up there. They pop over. You could try that, Arne. They just pop over for a wee trip to Scotland. But of course, if they hit bad weather, everything goes wrong. The people were okay, but the plane came down in the Cairngorms. I had no idea so many planes come down in the Cairngorms in bad weather that have come from the north of Norway or Sweden. So weather again, and there's a story behind it.
Yeah, I'm thinking there is definitely a book to be written with these planes that come over and something happens, and unfortunately,
well, I've sort of written that, although that's not the main thing of the story, but that's what inspired that story.
Yeah.
That was reality, that was fact that inspired the story, facts I knew nothing about until you talk to people that work in that environment up the top of Cairngorm.
Thank you, Lynn, thank you. Arne, I wonder, I don't think, but I could be wrong, and I'm also seeing questions have started to arrive, so I'll bring those in as well. But Arne, I wonder, have you ever set any of your work in Scotland? And if you haven't, would you? And if you would, where would you set it? Where would you feel that affinity?
Oh, this is I've written 21 books now,
It's
so
tricky.
I have
Yeah.
to think through them. I actually don't think I have set anything in Scotland for some reason, because I have for a long time really loved Scotland. You know, like a place that's like home, but not at all, really. But so where would I put it then? It happens that especially when I joined the literary festival in Edinburgh, that I stroll around the city, and it's a very magical city in a way. It's very peculiar and has a very special, I don't know, noir feeling to it that I enjoy. But it's also very pretty compared to, you know this, of course, Glasgow, for example, which is tougher, basically a tougher. You have these two contrasts in a way, Edinburgh and Glasgow. But I would probably set it on the islands somewhere. I love islands for some reason.
Yeah, I agree with that. Maybe Sam can have a moment where for some reason or another he needs to.
Yeah, and suddenly has to dive again, which he has decided not to do. So,
but
yeah.
And please make sure Molly can be there as well. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I will return to them. But yes, yeah, I remember. No, I remember thinking I'm going to put something in Scotland when I had been there for these journeys with the walks in the Highland. I remember them very, very clearly, but somehow it didn't happen. There are still things to write.
There are, yes, always. Just a comment here from Colleen. Yeah, she says, greetings from Orkney, where today is a magical day, calm and sunny. So just like you were talking about, and you know, nothing bad could happen there. It's just so beautiful. Yeah, great. And then Peter Blenkinsop asks, do you feel that the the influence of dark and water is a reflection back to Beowulf and Grendel? And so that idea of those influences, you know, that from way back, do you feel them in your writing? Yeah. Arne, Lynn, I mean, can you point to, and even if not there, can you look back in others like the sagas or places like that, and you see that influence in your writing without realizing it?
Well, certainly the sagas, there's a lot of murders. You know, they killed one another regularly, but not only in Orkney was that going on. What I would say is, you know, I have set quite a few in Orkney, mainly because I just love going back there. But what I find fascinating about the past in Orkney, it lives right beside the present. You know, you can barely go a few yards before you're suddenly faced with another mound or a Neolithic circle. And I remember when we first went to live there, I mean, I was amazed at that. You know, that you were farming in between what was essentially Neolithic settlements, and then the wind blew away all that sand, and suddenly there was Scarabray. And so I think it definitely does influence your writing. I mean, when we did the set of short stories, the Bloody Scotland set of short stories.
I brought it with me, Lynn.
Yeah.
Just to give it a, there we go, in case anybody hasn't got a copy. Fabulous.
Well, I wrote just the way the chap was asking the question, because I had it in the present day, and it's set in Orkagar, which is Maeshowe, actually, the old name for Maeshowe. And it's an experience that someone has, Magnus has, within that mound. And you learn about a murder that happened in the mound, you know, back when the Vikings were in the mound, and you learn it through that, you know, the way that the past just clashes with the present. So there, it's true. I don't know about you, Arne, but of course Scotland is just a bit like Ireland. It's just got all these old stories and the mounds and the fairy stories and all the, particularly in the Highlands, there are so many places like that, in the Highlands and the islands. And it is a storytelling culture. And the story, and I certainly, coming from half Irish, you know, half Scottish background, you were supposed to be able to tell a story. Mm. If you couldn't tell a story, you better be able to sing a song or do a dance, but you were supposed to have something you could do, and storytelling was a big thing. And often the stories did involve the past and the myths and the I think that's what New Year Hogmanay is all about, really.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for that. Arne, do you feel the influence from any of those more ancient writings that are in your work?
It's difficult to say that you actually feel it, but you can look at it in hindsight and perhaps say that, oh, yeah, of course, there was something there. I remember meeting actually in Oxford a Nigerian writer whose name slips my mind right now, but he started talking about Scandinavian noir, or whatever you want to call it. And he said there's a clearly connection to the sagas. So the thing called Nordic noir, or whatever you want to call it, has had for him, who came from a very remote place, a direct connection with the sagas, and I thought that was amazing, and I saw a little bit of my own work, perhaps also in a new light, which was very interesting. So, and also when I read the sagas, the really good ones, there are a couple of really good sagas, and then there are some pretty boring ones as well. But the intense, short, you know, iceberg prose kind of stories, then you feel, okay, this is probably my ancestors after all, in a way. I also took one of those DNA tests, by the way.
Did you? Can you share with us what came out? Are you 100% Viking?
Yes.
Yeah.
It seems I am actually.
Yeah.
Which surprised me a little bit. I thought there must be something from, you know, Eastern Europe or Scotland or Britain, but no. It was very fundamentally.
So therefore this influence is certainly in your DNA, and it just transmits itself within the writing. Yeah. Now we have 2 questions, and I'm aware of time, so let's try. I'll Helen's question, and then Ryan. I'll do it this way. So Helen says, Lynn has been telling us about the West Coast in her latest book. Arne mentioned he might use the Scottish Islands as a setting. Thinking back to Joe Kennedy's presentation in the last session about fictional settings and ones drawing on Scottish Nordic hybrid features, would either of you consider using a setting that did the same thing in the 21st century, i.e. a sort of Scottish, sort of Nordic setting beyond Orkney and Shetland?
With an imaginary one here, a fictional.
Yes, she talks about a fictional setting. So would you create, you know, one of those Scottish Nordic spaces of one's own?
I'm going to let Arne.
Yeah, it's thank you.
It's an island between the north of Scotland and yeah, over towards your way. I mean, they used to be joined a way back, you know,
Exactly.
people
Yeah.
wandered across.
There are interesting connections with the Faroe Islands, for example, and
yes.
and Shetlands, of course. I've been to both Shetlands and Orkney, and I love both of them. But I don't know exactly how you would do that, but to have a meeting and a discussion and some common storytelling between a Scottish person and a Scandinavian person would not be a problem at all. No problems. No.
It wouldn't. I mean, it's interesting. For me, I know quite a few of my fellow writers, even although they're writing about, for instance, Scotland, and I'm sure it's the same with you in Sweden, they create a fictional town or a fictional location or a village or something like that. And certainly for my main crime series, I've never contemplated doing that because I love writing it in places I know, and I feel, and I've walked the walk and touched the stones, and I feel I'm there. And for me, the place itself has probably made me write the story. The place in its reality. So making up a place. Now, having said that, I should point out that the book before was a standalone, and the Party House, and it was set in a village called Blackrig in the Highlands. But if you walk along through my home village of Carbridge, it pretty well is Blackrig. You know, I just used the model, I just changed the name. Although the people are not the same people, although they would argue they are, you know, because they find themselves in the book. But that is the first time I've ever just created a place. Although it really is Carbridge, and I just stuck another name on it. I'm quite in awe of people that do that. Because you would need to know the geography, you would need to draw your map, you would need to know every street and where it is, whereas I can just go back and have another look if I'm not sure. So it's in the world of science fiction, if you know what I mean. So that sounds like more work to me. I don't know.
Yeah. You see, I'm thinking, what could be created when you bring those aspects together? And I'm almost thinking, and I'm not making any suggestion here today, but that idea, you know, there are a number of books now being written between two authors, various different kinds. I'm just thinking, and it's not meant to sound like a joke at all, but if you got a Scandi author and a Scottish author together, I don't know, I was going to say in a bar, you know, what might emerge?
They meet up in the bar at bloody Scotland all the time. Maybe you're just giving them ideas.
Yeah, and it would be lovely to see what would come out of that.
Well, you know, if you think about that one, the bridge between,
between Denmark and Sweden.
I thought that was quite amazing because I mean, I get a bit of that because the Scottish Police Scotland operates completely separately and differently from south of the border, and and it's quite interesting when you're writing a book that difference, even in the law. You know, the number of people in a jury, all that is completely different between England and Scotland, and so it causes quite tension. You know, if something happens in Scotland, which the Met are interested in, so they want to take ownership of it, and want to keep on. And I think that, you know, I was just thinking when you were talking about that, if you had an island that was sort of half of it was owned by Scotland and half of it was owned by Sweden or whatever, then you've got it's like Cyprus. Then you've got two different operational things, and that could be fun.
Yeah.
Fun. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that notion. Again, I can see another book in the making. No pressure. Anyway, we mustn't miss Ryan's question that there is here. And it takes us a little bit deeper here. And it talks about, he asks about the darkness below the surface of water. Is this also mirrored in undercurrents found in ordered, and by that clean and planned urban environments? So maybe more in line with Scandinavia than Scotland. And he asks, do you think this links to a human need or an expectation of chaos? So, that idea of the darkness below that water really is where life is ordered and everything seems to be in its place. Does the water allow for that, that looking at the chaos that really lurks under the surface of society?
Well, I think there has been the image of Sweden as a very well organized, very well set, very maybe even a bit square society in a way, where everything works and nobody has to starve in the streets and so on. I think this image has had some serious blows in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And the undercurrents, if there were undercurrents, they are kind of coming up to the surface right now.
Yeah.
Very much. We have a new kind of criminality that's starting to be problematic for real. So maybe when the whole thing with the Nordic Noir started, in a way, it was a protest somehow against the perfectly clean, and it never was that, of course, but the image of the kind of tourist image of some kind of paradise, that's what we protested against, really. We had to bring up the undercurrents to the surface. Maybe it's not necessary anymore.
Yeah, maybe, as you say, sadly, because of especially what's been happening recently with those bombs and things, that has come to the surface, and it's not that sense of hypocrisy in that we don't pretend, we can't pretend anymore that everything's okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Lynn, I wonder, because again, just this idea of what Arne's mentioned about how, an ordered society isn't an ordered society. And scholar Jill Plain, this was something I wanted to ask. She said about how Scottish literature, she feels it shines a light on hypocrisy in society. And to me, I don't see Scottish society as being, being built on any kind of hypocrisy, because maybe it's just the Scots that I know who say it like it is. There's no, it's not sugar-coated. It's not like it is. I mean, so would you agree with her that Scottish literature can be seen like that? And does Scottish crime fiction work in a way to uncover what might be seen as some kind of hypocrisy?
Well, I do think that, and I think it was Ian that said this, and I don't know if he said it at Bloody Scotland or somewhere else, but if you're going to visit a country that you've never visited before, don't buy a travel book. Find out who's the most popular crime writer working in the contemporary crime writing, and read their book, because you learn about all the stratas of society. You enter every strata, and you also get to know the pressure points. You get to know the bad things that are happening, and certainly I speak from my point of view, as a former daughter to a police inspector who managed to try and keep everything that was happening from us. I'd like to think that when I write, I'm dealing with the good and the bad in the Scottish society. And I'm not pretending that the police are all good, and I'm not pretending that they get everything right. They're people who happen to also be policemen. And I like to open doors on things that perhaps people don't know are happening or have happened, because you should feel you're in Scotland, in that world.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Because I say, as you know, for me, I totally agree with you, and I know it's been said that idea of crime fiction so lends itself to understanding a place and a time, and where, less nowadays, thankfully, where people have felt it was a lesser kind of literature. I'm pleased to see that, in so many universities, that crime fiction is studied, that sociological study, that literary study, because it does give us that view. I don't know if there are any more questions from the people that are watching, but I've got a couple more that I would like to ask, and it's to do with your viewing habits of Nordic noir or Scottish crime writing that's been adapted for the screen. So, Lynn, if I might start with you, we mentioned The Bridge, of course, but do you have any other favourite series or film that you might watch, and you've watched it because it's set in one of the Nordic countries?
Well, what I would say, the Scandi noir series changed television forever. We had scenarios before that where, books like Ian's were taken up, but they had to be like an hour long. And it was a ridiculous thing where you get the complexity of behavior and character and the world that you were in. And somehow you were just to skip through it. And it was the Scandi countries that started to take a story, whether it was from a book or adapted from a book, and give it time to breathe. And I can remember just so falling in love with them all, because I felt I was in a book.
Mm-hmm.
I could watch an episode, or I could go on to the next one once it went up in a streaming service. I was in a book, only it was just a visual book. And I think it changed everything. You can tell now how much that changed, and it was the Scandis that did that.
Yeah.
And caught up. The BBC caught up. The ITV caught up. The Scandis changed the form. They took a book and they let it breathe on screen. So basically, anything it says Scandi noir, I watch it.
Yeah, I love what you say. It almost sounds like a good wine, doesn't it? Like just opening up, letting it breathe. And I think also as well, appreciating many more characters' points of view because of that, and the complexity as well of the story. Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Arne, is there anything Scottish writing or Scottish viewing that you have enjoyed, that, say, somebody said to you, Arne, can you recommend something that you might have read from over the water? Is there anybody or any work that comes to mind?
Yeah, there are. If you look at books, then I could probably mention a couple.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
I am looking a little bit for the TV series, though. Wasn't it one called simply called Crime recently? That was very good, very dark. That was interesting. And if I look closer, of course, I will find it. Ian's the filmatizations of Ian Rankin's books are always, of course, because Ian was one of my. You could probably say that I started reading and thus writing crime fiction because of Sjöwall Wahlöö and Henning Mankell and Ian Rankin, basically, because there was something about the atmosphere of these Edinburgh stories that I couldn't get out of my head. So the Rebus character is always gonna, resonate in my writing, at least. So I'd have to go back to Ian Rankin's books mostly. Also a couple of Val McDermid's, you know, the what's he called, is he a forensic guy?
Yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah.
wire in the blood. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I liked your, I haven't read your books in a while, but I read the first one, the DriftNet book, which I found, ooh, this is very different, very exact, very precise. I love that very much.
Thank you.
So I could dig a lot deeper in that area. Denise Miner, for example, Peter May,
Arne,
and your colleague Alex Gray, I like that her much too. Yeah.
Do you know, Arne? I love what you're doing here, because again, we've reached 3 o'clock. We've just gone past 3 o'clock, but in your response, you have provided that beautiful wraparound of giving us Sherval Valor, Henning Mankell, and then you've named, you know, those Scottish authors alongside, and it's like we came here to look at that notion, and you've brought us to a perfect moment to say, yeah, thank you. To everybody who has been part of the seminar here, the session watching, thank you so much for being with us. For the people who popped their questions in, that was really helpful. It was lovely to look at the things you've been thinking about. Lynn Anderson, Arne Dahl, thank you for giving of your time so that we could, I'm sorry if some of my questions sometimes put you on the spot, but as creative people, you know, you were fabulous, and it was lovely to hear your thoughts about various aspects. So thank you so much for your time today. And again, Ian, thank you for organising this session. I feel very, very selfish in a way to have had 2 authors whose work I really like, and I got to be with them. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and thank you from the Society to both Arne and Lynn.